Go ahead and welcome Penny. Penny Caldwell from Sail Nelson. Uh, she has many other accolades behind her name. I'll let her introduce herself and what we're all about. Um, we've gone through this Zoom as a dry run, and it's a fascinating tale of bringing a boat back. I believe it's a Juneau 51 back from Maui after the Vic Maui race to return it back home safe and sound. And every time you get out on the big bad ocean, you have all kinds of fun stories to tell. And this is no different. So I guess without further ado, we're going to listen to the good stuff. If Penny, who will be moderating her own Zoom meeting, wants to take questions, I guess we'll let her do that, or you can hold off until we're done and do a little question and answer. But this is a great time to talk about out sailing on the Big Blue. If you ever plan to do that, or if you're just curious about ocean sailing. So I'm going to go ahead and do whatever I do to turn this over to Penny, and she'll start the return from the Vic Maui. And I guess I just hit share screen.
So I'll share my screen. I've got everything here, I think.
You have it?
Yep.
Thank you, Penny. Okay.
Hey.
You've got the ball, and we look forward to hearing all about your adventures. And thanks so much for doing this, by the way.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for the introduction, Todd. Thank you. Thanks for having me, everyone. I apologize if I'm not always looking straight over at you, but let me see here. Can you see the Crossing the Pacific slide?
I can see it.
Perfect. Okay, great. We did go through it, but you never know with technology sometimes. So.
For sure.
Great. Well, thanks so much for having me. Like Todd mentioned, my name is Penny. I run a small sailing school up north of the border in a town called Nelson. And we are located in the interior of BC. And a few years ago, I was lucky enough to join on to a trip. I was the watch captain for a friend to help bring his boat back from the Vic Maui yacht race. So I'm going to kind of walk you through some of that. I'll start off a little bit with a bit of my background and how I got into sailing. So I'm from a family of sailors. I was baptized in the salt water of the St. Lawrence River, which is kind of eastern Canada, going through to Montreal and then out to the Atlantic Ocean. And I was lucky enough to have a grandfather and a great-grandfather and aunts and uncles, everyone who basically sailed. So these are some pictures from my youth when I started taking sailing lessons. I was about 5 years old when I started with the Canadian Yachting Association, now called Sail Canada. It's kind of equivalent to your ASA or US Sailing associations that you have. Worked my way up through the various levels and became an instructor. I started coaching dinghy sailing when I was about 15, moved on to bigger boats when I was 18, became an advanced instructor doing overnight passages and stuff when I was 20. And for a while there, I lived on a boat, lived that dream of basically having people out on the boat with me for a week. I'd get a day or two in between the course and I'd restock, reprovision the boat, get a new group of people on the next week. So it was a great time, a lot of fun. And then for some reason, at some point in my mid-20s, I decided I should start adulting, and I went and got a real job with the federal government, and I did some work for a while. But pretty soon, it became pretty obvious to my husband and I that we weren't quite living the dream that we wanted to. We were working and living in Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada, very busy, and dropping my kids off at 7 a.m., picking them up at 6 p.m. So we decided to pack everything up and we moved out to Nelson, British Columbia. So here we are out in Nelson. I am getting back to my love of sailing. There were no schools in the area, so I opened my own, and it's been a great success. And I've had a lot of students coming through. It's been great meeting people and making connections out here. And I'm passing on the bug to my husband and my kids as well. So Nelson is located on Kootenay Lake, which is one of the things that attracted us to this area. Kootenay Lake is about 64 miles long and 2.4 miles wide. So it's not very wide. It's fairly narrow, and it has mountains on either side. It's quite a deep lake. It is the biggest and deepest inland lake in British Columbia, 450 meters deep. And we also have primarily a lot of our sailing is done on the west arm of Kootenay Lake, which is kind of down in here. So Nelson itself is pretty small, about 10,000 people, but we do have a pretty avid sailing group out here. Lots of racing and weekend trips and stuff. So how did I get introduced to the whole Vic Maui international yacht race scene? That was through basically redoing my instructor course. I went out to Vancouver, and I was recertifying some of my instructor levels because I had let them lapse when I was doing my government work and doing my adulting. And I met my friend Travis. And so basically, Travis introduced me to the Vic Maui race. He had raced 3 times now with his boat. It's called Turn Again, and I'll show you pictures of the boat. And he was looking for a crew to help him bring his boat back. So the race itself was established in 1965. It basically happens every 2 years. It's considered to be one of the top offshore Pacific yacht races that you can participate in. They take roughly about 20 boats a year, a little more, a little less, depending. And normally, depending on the size of the boat, you're looking at anywhere from 8 to 12 people on the boat. So in our case, we were 8 people who brought the boat back, and there were also 8 different people who raced the boat there. So the race starts in Victoria in BC, and it goes all the way across to Lahaina, Hawaii. And it crosses over 2,300 nautical miles. And at the time, I didn't really think much about that distance until I realized that that's basically driving across Canada. It's like the equivalent of driving from Montreal to Vancouver. So it's a huge distance. So the average time that it takes for a boat to complete it is about 15 days. Again, give or take a few, depending on the type of boat and the hull speed and everything, and obviously the conditions that they're sailing in. And the fastest crossing happened fairly recently in 2016. It took Valkyrie 8 days, 9 hours, 17 minutes, and 53 seconds, to be exact, to complete the race. So after I signed up for the race, I decided to do some research. I figured I better figure out where I'm going. And I started looking up some facts about the Pacific Ocean, and it's quite a fascinating place. Covers 46% of the Earth's surface, has the deepest trench in the world at 11,000 meters, which is deeper than the height of Mount Everest. There's 55 different countries that border the Pacific Ocean. There's over 25,000 islands in the Pacific Ocean. There's also the Ring of Fire, which causes a lot of disturbance in the seabed of the Pacific Ocean as well, and it has a huge effect on the currents and the temperatures and all kinds of stuff. So it's a really fascinating thing for me to research in the end. And basically, the more I started researching it, the more I thought, oh my goodness, what have I gotten myself into? But Turn Again is a very well stocked or very efficient boat, and Travis is a really good skipper. That's one of the main things that if you ever think of doing something like this, you really do want to research your skipper. As much as it is flattering or nice to have somebody offer for you to join onto their boat, you need to be comfortable with them and with their credentials and their abilities to know that they are going to be taking care of you when you're out on the water. So basically, with Travis, I was kind of his first mate or his right-hand person. He was going to be doing one round of shifts, and I would be doing the other. And I'll talk about our shifts and how those work and everything. But basically, Travis, he was the only person who came back with the boat. He always goes both ways because it's his boat, and he just loves doing the trip anyway. But it is very exhausting to do that type of sailing for that long. He was basically at sea for the equivalent of, it's about like 4 to 5 weeks at the end of it when you end up, turning around, reprovisioning, and making your way back. So Turnagain is a 51 foot Beneteau Oceanus. It's a first line trim line. Displacement 26,000 pounds. We had 8 crew. We had many flying fish that ended up attacking us and landing on the deck. We caught a few fishing nets, which I'll talk about as well. And we found a stowaway halfway through our trip. So that was pretty interesting as well. So this is a rendition and a photo basically of the inside of Turnagain. So one of the things that we did is we used the V-berth. So up here in the bow, the V-berth was used for all of our gear. So because Turnagain was racing, there's a lot of extra gear on the boat. So there's extra sails, you got extra spinnakers, and you got code zeros, and you've got all the rigging that goes with those sails as well. And also, again, Travis being a very prepared skipper, we had a huge first aid kit. We had a grab bag, which is an emergency bag for if you need to abandon ship. Basically, you want to have a waterproof storage bag that has food, safety gear and flares, an EPIRB, all kinds of stuff, so that if you need to abandon ship quickly, you can grab that bag and go. That's why it's called a grab bag. So basically the V-berth kind of became our dumping ground for all of our gear. And we would be sleeping in these aft cabins back here. So basically there are 2 people per cabin. So as you can imagine, we were doing what's called hot bunking. And this is very common. It's basically one crew gets out of bed, they go up on shift, the next crew comes off their shift, they hop into bed, the bunk's nice and warm for you. You change you bring all your own bedding, so you're not sharing bedding, but, and you also have in between you, you have these cloths down here. They're called lee cloths. And these are pretty much essential when you are out on the ocean, or even if you're doing any kind of night passage. It's just way more comfortable to have a lee cloth. And what it does is it just holds you in your bunk. So, you roll over, you hit a wave, you're not going to roll out of bed and wake up on the floor. So on a trip like this, because of the distance, we were on a starboard tack for about a week, maybe 10 days, and then we tacked and we were on a port tack for the rest of the way. So again, when you're doing a long distance offshore sailing, it's not uncommon to end up on the same tack for a really long time. And also the funny thing with that is, your body gets used to leaning a certain way, and you also get used to, you have your bruises on one side of your hip and you're constantly bracing yourself in one direction. And then after about 10 days of getting used to that, you tack, and then you have to start all over again, getting used to leaning the other way, getting the bruises on the other side. So it's pretty interesting that way. The shifts that we did for our particular trip, they worked out really, really well. I really enjoyed these shifts, but basically during the day we would do 6 hours. So team A is on for 6 hours while team B is down below sleeping. And then at lunchtime, we would switch. So the first shift is 6 a.m. till lunch. The second shift is 12 until 6 p.m. So same idea. One group is up top doing their shift. The other group is sleeping. And then the night shifts that we did 4 hours. And that doesn't seem like a lot, but it is a lot when you really have to focus at night and you're basically staring at the compass the entire time. Or if you're lucky enough, it's clear out, you can pick a star, line it up with your shrouds, and then that becomes your point, and then you just reference your compass every once in a while. But it is very tiring to be helming for that long. So we basically switched around every half an hour within our own group in our 4 hour stretch. But I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. These are our crews. So we ended up with a couple fun names. So this is Travis's team. We dubbed them Team Racing. So Travis is the captain, boat owner. We have Paul over here on the one side of the screen. We called him the chef because actually he is a chef by trade. He sails on the side. So we had some amazing meals. We were pretty spoiled with Chef Paul. At the bottom, we have Kate. Kate is Travis's partner, and she actually had done the race in 2016. And then we have Duncan, who is a Kiwi, and we called him Curious George because he would ask questions about everything and he would get into everything. And he was like one of those people that would pull something and then ask, should I have pulled that? So it was always fun having Duncan around. My team was called Team Cruising. So here I am. I'm Travis's watch captain, first mate. I'm there to help out, make sure that everybody's pulling their weight, everything is going well. Try to take some of the burden off of Travis as far as, navigation, checking weather, whatever needs to be done. Giving him the peace of mind of knowing that when he's down below sleeping, I've got everything under control, or at least the Team Cruising has everything under control. So we have Joe over here on the one side. Joe, we called Joe the tea master. Just he's British and he loves his tea, and he was constantly making us tea, which was really nice. His partner is Ren over here. Ren also has a lot of sailing experience under her belt, and she actually did this trip when she was 17 with her dad. And she became known as the badass gaffer because we were catching a lot of tuna, and Ren turned out to be scarily, I don't even know if that's a word, but frighteningly good with a gaff. She was able to gaff a tuna like in 2 seconds. So it was a bit traumatizing for the rest of us, but it was great. Gave us good food. And then we have Jeff. I called Jeff the gymnast because Jeff was my bunk mate, and somehow he ended up in the small side of the aft bunk, and he's 6'5", and so it was always really funny and fun and amusing for me to watch him try to wiggle his way into his berth with his lee cloth up. So we had a lot of fun doing that and just kind of getting to know each other. So this is the night before we left. Beautiful sunset. We have the outriggers out practicing and paddling. We're at the dock here, just sitting back, relaxing. We went out for a nice dinner before we left for the trip. Everyone here enjoying themselves. One of the things that I did prior to leaving is I cut out all coffee and alcohol. That's just something that I always do before I do any kind of overnight passage. I just don't want to be in a position where I have headaches from not having caffeine, for instance. So, and maybe we get out there and the weather's horrible, and the last thing I want to do is go down below and try to make myself a coffee. So I tend to cut out all stimulants. Everyone else didn't really follow my advice, and so that turned into interesting story the next day, but we all had a lot of fun when we were out. So here we are, we're leaving Honolulu. Spirits are high. Everybody's having a blast. We have good winds, probably 15 to 20 knots. Turn again is just charging through the waves. There's Travis and I laughing at the stern, Joe up at the helm. And then as we kind of start getting a little bit further out, the wind and waves kind of die down. Well, the wind dies down a bit, but not necessarily the waves. And you kind of see down here at the bottom, everyone's expression kind of starts to change a little bit. I'm up at the bow. I love being up at the bow. It's one of my favorite places to just sit and be quiet and be on my own. So, but everybody was having a blast, just out enjoying the sun. So, our shift, or team cruising, was the first night shift, and this was unfortunately where I made one of my first rookie mistakes, which I do not often, but they do happen. But one of the things that I did not do for my first night shift is I did not pack my foul weather gear full of snacks. So usually I always have a water bottle with me up top, and I put all kinds of granola bars, gummy bears, like just snacks. So that way, if I'm getting hungry or anything, if I'm getting tired and I need a little boost, I have basically my pockets are packed full of snacks. So that was my first mistake. I didn't do that. And another mistake was that I hadn't been out living on boats for a while. So, and because I was also Travis's like right-hand person, I was, a little bit nervous about the trip and worried about, what if I, let him down, or what if I'm not feeling good, or what. I'm lucky. I've never experienced seasickness before. But on this trip, for whatever reason, I decided, you know what, I'm going to take preventative methods or preventative measures, and I'm going to take some seasickness medication. So as somebody who doesn't normally take medication, I used a scopolamine. Sorry, I'm French. I can't always pronounce things, but I used one of those seasickness patches that you put behind your ear. And so I put that on the morning before we left. And funny enough, at one point in the afternoon, I was chatting with Ren, and she noticed that like my pupils were dilated unequally, but she didn't say anything. And then by the end of our night shift, I wasn't feeling too great. I was feeling pretty loopy. And so I ended up going down below, and I basically slept for an entire day. It just knocked me out. So, I mean, in one hand, I was lucky that we were actually heading in to Hanalei Bay. So we were going into the bay to anchor and do some boat work. So here we are doing some, cleaning. Ren and Joe cleaned the bottom of the boat. Jeff and I helped clean the top side. And then we also had another boat traveling with us called Kraken. And Kraken was having some electrical issues, so we were using that time at the anchorage to kind of help them out and stuff like that. So I was kind of lucky that I had my little dopey episode before we left for the trip, really, but I was a little bit embarrassed about that one. So basically that evening shift that we had, the first shift, that's kind of when people started feeling a little bit off. And one thing that a lot of people underestimate when they do a trip like this is the effect that seasickness can have on the entire crew. So we were really lucky that mine was just induced by taking medication that I shouldn't have taken. In the end, I probably would have been fine. But I decided to be preemptive on that one. Ren and Joe were doing fine. They felt pretty good. Jeff, on the other hand, did not feel great. Jeff had a few days of not being very good. So we kind of all learned a lesson with that one. But so while we were getting ready to leave and we were at anchor, our water maker became disconnected, and we realized that the water maker was filling the bilge of the boat with water. At the time, we thought it had already passed through the desalinator, and so it was fresh water. And then you'll find out as I go along that that was not necessarily the case. But so here we are. We cast off from the anchorage. I'm feeling great again. I'm back on my feet. Everything's ready to go. There's Duncan and I having some fun. And here is a quick video of us heading out on our first ocean sail. So there you go, a little video there. So about 2 days into our sail, things started getting a little bit odd. So first thing, our automatic identification system, our AIS system, went down and the radar went down. So we started losing some of our electronics. So we didn't have a GPS, we didn't have the AIS, we didn't have the radar. Um, Thankfully, Travis has the boat completely decked out, so we did have internet and we had our good old-fashioned compass. But because we didn't have the GPS, for instance, the auto helm wouldn't work. So we had to hand steer the entire trip after that. So that's when was mentioning that, we did 30-minute increments in our within our time when we were up on deck to be helming. It was really because of the fact that we were hand helming the entire trip. So here's a couple of photos. So this Jeff spent about 4 days trying to be part of the team and trying to help us out, but he was really not feeling good and he was not eating or drinking. And finally, on by the end of day 4, I said to Travis, like, Jeff needs to get up. He needs to start getting fluids in. So I basically threw him up on the helm. And I started coaching him through sailing and what he needed to do to kind of feel good and how to ride the waves and stuff like that. So Jeff was the greenest person on our crew. He had done sailing when he was younger. He had done dinghy sailing, but this was his first big trip. So it was all very new to him. So it was great, though, to get him up. You can see in this photo over here, he's not feeling too great. He's not too happy to be up, but he was definitely game to get up and help us out. So he started working on that. This is just a beautiful sunset that we had. Gorgeous, gorgeous. Just blue all the way around. We did a lot of fishing. So like I mentioned, we have mahi-mahi while we were close to Hawaii. We had all kinds of fish that we caught and none of it went to waste. We would either mix it up and eat it right away, or Paul would do like a ceviche and have it marinating, or Travis also had a freezer on board and he had processing stuff on board so that we could even vacuum seal the fish if we needed to, but it never really made it that long. We were all over it. It was delicious. And like I mentioned, there's Ren. She's loving the gaff, and yeah, she she terrified us all with that one. Oh, there she is. Now she's filleting at least. But yeah, it was great. Really neat experience. And we would always make sure that we brought the lines in around 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening because we call it shark hour. That's when the sharks start coming up. And if you have your lines out, it's pretty likely that you're going to end up hooking a shark. This is actually one of the only trips where Travis did not hook a shark. He mentioned that not hook a shark, but at least see a shark. But he mentioned every other trip he always had, in the evenings he would see sharks, but we actually didn't see any on this trip. So I guess we were lucky that way. All right, so after a couple days and some food and some water, Jeff has been reborn. He is loving life again. He is just really happy to be up and at 'em and back on the helm. So one of the next experiences that we had was we were down below making lunch. Travis was putting together some ahi tuna bowls for us, some poke tuna, and the waves were pretty chaotic. That was one thing that I was surprised when we were out there. I expected that the waves would be a little more kind of equal or consistent, but they were pretty sporadic and they were all over the place. And every once in a while, we'd have a wave that would not necessarily come from the opposite direction, but it kind of came out of nowhere. So for those of you who have been out in bigger water, you know that basically every fifth wave is about double the size. So we had one instance where we were down below making lunch. We're all chatting in the galley, and then a wave hits, and we start kind of leaning over, and we're like, "Oh, okay," felt like every other time. But then the boat kept going and kept going and kept going, and next thing you know, Jeff had lost his grip on the counter of the galley and he went flying across to the other side of the boat and he obliterated the head door. So the head door smashed into spectacular pieces. And that was the last shred of privacy that any of us had whatsoever on this trip. So we were done with that from then on. So basically, anytime that you had to do your business, you had to announce it to everyone, ask them to evacuate the area, and hold a towel over the door while you tried to sit there bracing yourself against the waves to go to the washroom. So it just added to the charm of the whole experience in the end. It's something that we laugh about now, but so there was a lot of rain a few times during this trip as well. And the other thing too is that in the evenings, basically it almost feels like the boat has been hosed down. There's just so much moisture in the air out there that every night uh, everything was soaked. So basically you would pick a spot where you wanted to sit and you would kind of stay there as long as you could because you'd soak up everything around you, or you'd have a nice little dry spot, and then you'd only move when you were heading up to the helm. So for us, really, our foul weather gear was key. I did a lot of research on foul weather gear before the trip because I had basically I had some two Mustang offshore survival suits, but they were floater suits, and that's kind of what I used to wear way back when I was doing live aboard courses in the 90s. And the flotation had broken down and they just weren't great suits any longer. So and technology has changed tremendously since then. So I did a lot of research on kind of what kind of foul weather gear do we want. We ended up all getting this sorry, the same gear except for Jeff. He had a different suit. But Renjo and I all ordered the same stuff, and we were using the Helly Hansen offshore gear. And basically, it's important to invest in good gear because this gear, it breathes and it also keeps you dry with the rain. So this gear that we got is not about warmth necessarily, because all of the warmth comes from having proper base layers. So we all had our long johns and proper base layers to wear underneath the foul weather gear. But making sure that you're nice and dry is key. And the other thing too is it's kind of shocking when you're on the helm and you're at the stern, the wind noise is quite pronounced. So a lot of times I would have my hood on, and there's even a thing that goes across the hood that you'll see in one of the other pictures. And I was basically just enclosed in my little cocoon because of your ears do get tired from the noise as well as the cold wind. So um, eating on board, like I mentioned, lots of snacks, lots of granola bars, lots of quick protein type things and carbs for us to grab. But primarily, we had a lot of really great food on the boat. I was quite surprised, but we ate all of our meals out of dog bowls. And the dog bowls are brilliant because they basically have a rubber bottom, and so they don't slide around. So we were in some pretty gnarly waves and we would be eating lunch and you put your bowl down to grab a drink of your water or whatever, and the bowl just stayed put. So it was great. We had a lot of kind of like charcuterie type meals with bread and cheese. We had a lot of tuna based meals, tuna salads, tuna sandwiches, whatever Chef Paul was cooking up for us. And we also I did a lot of Mr. Noodles. I haven't had Mr. Noodles since I was like a kid, and they were delicious. Everything on a boat tastes better, as you guys probably know. So, I mean, I could have been eating dog food out of the dog bowls and I would have been happy, but so yeah, we had a lot of great food on board. We used plastic water bottles, only because the metal water bottles do leave dents and they mark the floors and they can break things and stuff. So as much as the water doesn't taste as good in the plastic, that's kind of what we were using. Yeah, so basically, we would always try to have one meal per day together. It usually worked out that we would have the 6 a.m. kind of breakfast together and then 6 p.m. dinner together. So a lot of times we would overlap twice, which was really nice. But yeah, we would try to get together at least twice a day for, a meal and kind of chit chat and catch up and stuff. I have a couple more videos here. So one is Travis is doing some barbecuing for us.
Don't open it yet. Fantastic.
And then this is a video of Ren helming. I'm down here eating. I was starved, so I'm eating as fast as I can. I apologize. But this is Ren kind of negotiating some of the waves. Oops, whoops. Sorry about that. All right, so here is Joe. Again, we joked that he was our tea guy. He was always boiling water for us and getting things organized. Usually what we would do is we would try to boil a big pot of water when things were fairly calm. And then we would fill up a big thermos. So we would have some hot water and then we could just pour it in. Anytime you're working with hot liquids or hot food or anything like that down below, you want to be wearing your foul weather gear so that if anything does spill, you're protected. And also you would use the pot clamps. So the stove will have clamps on it. And there's also a gimbaled feature on the stove. And a lot of boaters, a lot of us that sail offshore or overnight or whatever, often we just take the gimbal pin basically right out of the oven. So it is constantly in a gimbaled position. That way you don't forget that it has been gimbaled, so you don't end up getting scalded or anything like that. So about halfway through, we found out that we had a stowaway. So in the evening one night, I kept hearing this little chirping noise, but we were literally in the middle of the ocean. So was like, there's no way there's a bird or anything like that. And then the next morning, Travis found a whole bunch of white plops all over the deck, and same thing, he's kind of like, what is going on? And so we ended up we had a stowaway. We had this bird that it turns out it is an ocean bird, and it did fly out and come to the boat. It wasn't on the boat from the beginning, but we nicknamed him Simon. He became our little pet. And team cruising, well, we adopted Simon. Team racing actually threw him off the boat twice, but he always found a way back when we came back on board, so that was always fun. But we did have some albatross come by and hang out with the boat a little bit. That was really cool. They're really neat animals because they just skim the top of the water. You think that they're going to hit a wave because some of the waves just look like it's going to come up and get it, but the bird just kind of floats right up and over. Really neat. We had porpoises as well. Ren and I, one time, we were sitting in the cockpit chatting away, and then something jumped behind me, and Ren was like, what was that? And then we realized we had about 5 porpoises that had caught up to the boat, and they were up at the bow diving around. So we took some videos and stuff. That was really neat. And then another time in the evening at night, we had some porpoises come along beside the boat. And the only reason why we knew that they were there was because of the phosphorescence in the water. And I'll show you a picture. It's not my picture, but the phosphorescence was just amazing. And I'll show you that in a sec. And then we had a lot of flying fish. And so one night I was up on helm and I got hit in the head by a flying fish. And there's nothing more eerie than being in total darkness, not quite sure where you're going. Or not where where you're going, but you can't see where you're going, and having something kind of hit the side of your head, and then you're wondering what the heck. So the next morning, I found this big guy hanging out, on the cockpit floor. So I figure he's probably the one that hit me in the head. But we saw lots of sunfish. They get quite large, and they actually look like sharks because the one fin is out of the water and it looks like a shark fin. So at first we thought, we finally saw a shark. Then we realized it was a sunfish. Lots of Valilla valillas. So they are kind of like little jellyfish, like blue. And they just kind of there were thousands, probably millions of them all over the surface of the water in some parts, which was really neat. We did see some sea turtles as well. We stopped, we went around one of them because we thought maybe he had been caught up in a fish net, but he was fine. And some whales. And so actually on the whole topic of garbage, I was keen to find out, are we going to see as much garbage as people talk about? Like, is there really that much garbage out there? And so we went out of our way to avoid the garbage patch as much as possible. And unfortunately, we had at least 5 or 6 days where we saw, like I counted 30 plus pieces of garbage. And those are the pieces of garbage that are big enough for us to see and to count. I would say 90% of it is commercial fishing gear that's just been dumped, or there's huge barrels. We saw lots of big plastic barrels. I have no idea what's in them. We saw car tires, lots of fishing nets, like just crazy. We actually had 3 fishing nets get caught on our keel. So each morning when we got up, basically what would happen is Travis would take the GoPro and he'd have it on a pole mount, and then he would walk around the boat to check the bottom and the keel and the rudders just to see if we had caught on to anything. And we had 3 separate occasions where we hooked fishing nets. And so Travis used the drive your motor like a crazy guy to get the fishing nets off because we couldn't pry them with a boat hook or anything like that. So he just kind of drove the crap out of the engine and managed to get them off that way. But so night sailing is always lots of fun. One of my favorite times is the time between when the sun sets and then the moon comes up. It's super dark, lots and lots of stars. And I was quite shocked, actually. I had forgotten how many shooting stars that you see when there is no light around you. It's just literally one after the other. Like, there's so much debris coming through our atmosphere every night that we don't see because of light pollution. So it was not hard at all to just see star after star coming through. So that was really cool. And then, yeah, we all have headlamps with night vision setting, so the red light setting. It was pretty important to figure out how to turn on your light and get it straight to the night setting. Most of us had a light that, you could click it once and it would be on the night setting. Jeff never seemed to kind of figure that out. So he would turn it on and it would be strobing, and then he'd click it again and it would be the bright white, and then he'd click it again and it's the dimmer light white. And anyways, so we all kind of went through these phases where Jeff would blind us because he'd be talking to you, clicking his light. So that was always fun. So this is just an example of the phosphorescence, and this is not a stretch as to how bright they were. I could sit at the stern of the boat and watch them trail off the boat. It was amazing. It's literally like diamonds kind of rolling off the rudder and off the stern. Is just gorgeous. So that was really, really cool. This is a picture of Ren and I where we finally got through some the rain went away. You can see how wet everything is here. Like, we were just constantly sitting in wet. That starts to kind of drain you after a while. But this was one of the nice sunny days. We had a nice rainbow behind us, so we were starting to feel good. And this was when we got to our halfway party. So the first week you start off excited, and then you're getting tired because the shifts are wearing you down, and then you think that the trip is never going to end. And then you get to that halfway point and it's like, yes, we made it halfway. So Jeff and I, we were lucky enough, the halfway point also coincided with our birthdays. So we had a fun birthday party. We had our lays. We cracked out or opened up a bottle of wine. And I think there was also some rum going around. So again, eating out of the dog bowls, everything is just delicious. And that night, actually, Travis made us steak on the barbecue. He was saving steak for us, and he also made us a birthday cake. And so the birthday cake was lopsided because the gimbal and the stove can only go so far, but it was delicious. Best cake I've ever had. There's Duncan enjoying some Bacardi, I think, and Travis at the helm. So we had lots of fun that night again, just kind of getting together and hanging out and enjoying it. It was great. And this is one of our blurry photos of everyone. So that was fun. Kind of recharges the soul a bit. And then we had crazy deluge of rain for the next 2 days. So we did end up doing quite a bit of motoring throughout the trip. We had enough fuel on board to motor halfway if we needed to. So 1,200 nautical miles of fuel. Obviously that was not what we wanted to do. That's not ideal, but we had enough fuel on board that we could go a fair distance if we needed to. And we did hit the doldrums. You can see behind me here, it's quite flat. There's really not much wind. When you have that kind of rain, there's not much wind coming with it. So we were all pretty soaked, and we're all laughing because basically whoever drew the short straw, they were out in the rain. And at this point, what we would do is we would just split the 4 hours in half. And so one person would do 2 hours and another person would do 2 hours. So two people would end up miserable and soaked while everybody else huddled under the Dodger. So there's us under the Dodger, staying nice and warm. Joe drew the short straw on that one. So he was out there getting soaked, and we were enjoying reading and whatever else we were doing. So it was pretty fun. And the other thing with the shifts that I would mention too is it's really important. There's a lot of things that you have to complete or that you want to get done when you're on your shift. So that's your time to sleep. So when you're off shift, it's your time to sleep. It's your time to eat. It's your time to do any kind of bathing or cleaning up that you need to do. You got to get your gear organized. So there's a lot of things that you need to fit into that 4-hour time. And it's really important, though, to stick to the time that you need to be up on deck. There's nothing worse than having somebody even 5 minutes late, 10 minutes late. The people that are up on deck and they're looking to get down below to warm up and dry off and start to feel a bit more human. 10 minutes is a long time to be waiting for somebody to come up on deck. So everyone on the two teams were pretty punctual. I mentioned it once or twice to a couple people to, just make sure you're getting your stuff organized, make sure you're on time. But, overall, we had a really a good crew, and our switch over for the shifts was really good. So. And the other thing I was going to mention is how we came up with the names Team Cruising and Team Racing. So Team Racing, Travis's crew had Curious George and Kate and Paul. Those four are all big racers. And so basically, whether it was 2 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, whatever, they were constantly adjusting the sails. I lost count of how many times a winch handle was dropped on my head while I was trying to sleep. So we started joking and calling them Team Racing because they were, sailing the boat like they were racing somewhere. Meanwhile, here you have a photo of Team Cruising. That was our name. We were just happy to be out there. We were happy to be warm. We had books. We had our tea maker. We had Jeff making all kinds of jokes and stuff. So, we kind of joked around that we had these two very different teams going on. So, and yeah, as we got closer to the end of the trip, again, like I mentioned, Duncan liked to get into everything, and somehow he managed to find one last beer that had been crammed into the bottom of a cooler somewhere. So we found a way to split it 8 ways, but everyone got a little swig of that one. Here's a photo of me doing some helming. Really, with the waves, it was a constant. You were constantly adjusting your helming for the waves and watching. Again, because we didn't have the GPS or any autopilot or radar for that matter, we were constantly watching the compass. Everything was you were steering by compass day and night. So the compass's light is on at night; it's red. And the other thing too is that at night, because we didn't have our AIS or GPS, and just because it's good practice, we always had a lookout posted. So there was always somebody, at least 2 people who were kind of active up on deck. One was helming, one was watching the horizon to make sure that there were no vessels coming towards us. And we did have at least 2 or 3 instances where we were crossing shipping areas and there were large ships going through, and they would not pick us up on their radar system because we didn't have ours going. So we passed one vessel and they put their spotlight on us, and we kind of waved. Another vessel hailed us on the radio just to make sure that we were okay, because it's not very common that you have a large vessel like that doesn't have their equipment on. So yeah, this is just a gorgeous photo. Again, lots of blue on blue. The colors out there were just, it's kind of hard to explain. Yeah, just wide open. But and the other interesting thing too is that we had a lot of squalls come through, but because of the horizon and the view, I mean, we could watch the squalls coming towards us like 6 to 10 hours ahead of time. And there were several times where we were able to adjust our course to go basically right between them or whatever. So that was great. When we finally got back to town, to Victoria, I had my first hot shower. All the showers or cleaning that we did on the boat was all kind of, there's a shower head at the stern of the boat, but depending on the weather, it was a bit hairy to sit back there and try to shower off, or you'd use a bucket and try to shower off that way. So, but it was really nice to be in a non-moving shower stall. And yeah, my hair was a disaster because it had basically been in braids for almost 3 weeks. So, and here we are back at the dock. So Turn Again is behind us there. We all made it. We're all happy. We're all glad to be back on solid land. And here's a photo of Travis. We were planning on doing the 2020 Vic Maui together. Unfortunately, a few things, but one, Travis passed away in a scuba diving accident in November 2019, and then obviously with COVID, the Vic Maui race had been canceled for 2020. So there is a website for Vic Maui where they have a crew bank, so you can put in your information, your credentials, contact info, and then if people are looking for crew, they can contact you, whether that is for a delivery to bring a boat back, or whether you're interested in joining a race crew. So there's a few different options there. So okay, so I'm going to stop sharing that. I think that was the last slide. And are there any questions or comments? Or I'm sure there's all kinds.
It just looked fabulous. I just was smiling through the whole thing and I loved it, except for then that last slide. I'm so sorry to hear that he passed away. That's so tragic. I'm sorry about that. Yeah. But thank you for sharing. That was really fun to hear everything.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for, it was great when Todd reached out, because it was, walk down memory lane for me to go through all the photos again. And I wrote up blog posts as we went through, and there's more stories on that. But it was really fun to kind of go through everything again. So yeah, it was a great adventure. I definitely would recommend it. And it's funny because about for the first half of the trip, I kept saying, I'm never doing this again. I'm miserable. I'm cold. That's it. Forget it. And then you get to the halfway point and you're like, yes, I feel so accomplished. And then by the end of the trip, you're like, oh, I'm definitely doing this again. There's a lot of emotions that go through.
I have done many things like that. That sounds about right. That's so great.
Lots of ups and downs. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Penny, I noticed most of the slides showed the crew wearing tethers.
Yes.
Standard operating procedure for you?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, the tethers for us, anytime you come up at night, absolutely, you have to tether on, and you announce your presence up on deck. So you would say Penny's on deck, and you would clip in. So in our boat, and with most boats, you have a couple different tethering options. So usually there are permanent hooks in the cockpit. So when you are sitting in the cockpit, you're tethered on, and your tether usually has two lengths. So you have a shorter length for when you're just sitting somewhere. So you would clip on in the cockpit while you're sitting. And then running the length of the boat, you have what are called jack lines. And jack lines basically, it's a flat nylon line that is connected. Sometimes they're permanently affixed on the boat, depending on the type of boat. But basically, you would use your long tether to clip onto that line, and then you can walk back and forth along the boat, using handholds, handrails, or whatever as you're going forward if you need to fix something, for instance. But generally, we don't travel forward on the boat very often unless you have to. Like most boats have all the rigging running aft so that you're in the cockpit. The cockpit's your area of safety. But best practices at night, you always hook in. If you're in rough weather, you would also clip in as well. So we were clipped in quite often because, there were big waves. The videos don't really show the size of the waves, and we all tried to get photos and stuff, but it wasn't uncommon to have a 30-foot wave come by and just the whole boat just picks up and then the whole boat goes down. And we started laughing. We started calling it like the Sears elevator, where we were like, ding, third floor, menswear. And then we dropped down and we're like, back to ladies wear. So we had fun with that. And everything down below is, sliding from one side to the other. But yeah, it was, we didn't spend a lot of time not clipped in.
Yeah.
There was not, I brought a couple bathing suits with me and about 4 books thinking I was, going to relax. Yeah, no.
No. Oh, that's a great commentary. Before I let other people jump in with their questions, I just wanted to encourage everyone to maybe check out your webpage, Sail Nelson, and sign up for your newsletter. And we'll be posting this cottage meeting on our YouTube channel. If anybody would like to go over it again, you've really shared a bunch of really important blue water safety ideas, and I love putting snacks in your fall weather gear.
Yeah.
So you're a 2 thumbs up with Helly Hansen blue water fall weather gear.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I really liked the gear, and especially they have a really great women's line, which isn't a problem for a lot of people, but we have a different physique. So, and they have a nice drop seat, so you just unzip and you can sit down, and it's great. Yeah, you're not fooling around, because any of you who have been out on longer passages, the less time you spend down below fiddling with things, the better, right? So, that's why you want those snacks, and you want to have your gear basically with the foul weather gear and with the life jackets that we were using and your tethers. You want everything to be second nature. Like, you want to be able to put all of that stuff on without even having to think about it, because you're probably exhausted because you're doing shifts, you're not sleeping very well. but also B, if there's an emergency, you don't want to be trying to fiddle or remember, where things are. So all of our gear, everything is labeled. We all had our own hook that we would keep our gear on. So all of our gear would stay in the head, in the bathroom where we lost the door. So it was wide open. So it was good. But all of our gear would stay in there because it's, a wet friendly place. The floor is not getting wet and everything. So it's a great idea to keep all your gear in one place like that, to have your designated hook. So we had different colors, so we knew whose gear was hooked up where. We were lucky that we really didn't have any big emergencies. Like we didn't, we bumped into a few pieces of garbage, but there was no indication of hull damage or anything like that. There was no crew overboard. There was no big red flags where we would have had to run up on deck quickly. But if there was, we all knew where our gear was and we all knew how to put it on quickly. So, yeah.
Well, I'd just like to encourage our participants to go ahead and take advantage of asking questions of Penny. What a resource. Very stimulating to have you with us. So please, folks, jump in and ask questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you were returning the boat back to Victoria. How would that compare with the actual race going out to Hawaii?
Yeah, good question. So I know that Travis had the same type of shifts set up for the race as well. So they were doing the 4 hours overnight, 6 hours during the day. While we were bringing the boat back, he was downloading weather files twice a day. And for us, that was just more making sure we're not going to run into any squalls or any major weather coming through. As far as during the race, he would be using that information to really hone his heading and figuring out what sails he's going to use. And it's a much more detailed process when you're in the race. And as much as we made fun of team racing for constantly adjusting the sails and dropping stuff and being super loud, that's basically what it would have been like the whole time during the race. There's constant adjustments. You're reefing and unreefing, and your code zeros going up, or maybe your spinnakers coming up. And so there's definitely a lot more action, again, all depending on the weather and what you're getting into. But he would have had a lot of similar experiences with the crew, as far as, he had a couple people who were seasick for the first couple days. And a lot of times seasickness also just comes from nerves, doing something new, not knowing what you're what's expected of you or what you're going to encounter. So once those nerves start to go away, everybody kind of starts to feel better as well. But yeah, and during the race as well, we traveled back with Kraken, one of the other races. So during the race, though, they would have been, the 20 boats would have been a lot closer. And a lot of the skippers tend to call each other up and chat and discuss, where they are and how things are going. And it's actually a very, when you're out in those types of elements, it becomes a very camaraderie or kind of teamwork type of approach. Even though you're racing, you do really feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. Like we didn't even see air traffic for at least 4 days because we were in such an isolated part of the ocean that there's just no ships or airplanes or anything going by. So that's kind of an eerie thing. So during the race, there's definitely a lot more action, but it is similar to a delivery.
Hey, Penny, you had 4 people on a shift, right?
Yeah.
On a watch. Did you feel like that was a good number for that boat?
Yeah, yeah, it worked out really well. I mean, we did have a few times. So Jeff, like I mentioned, was the most junior person. Joe would have been the next junior person after him. So there were a few times where Ren and I, because of the weather, they weren't comfortable helming, and so Ren and I would split a shift, and I would helm for an hour, and then she would helm for an hour, and that was really tiring. But generally, for a boat that size, having 8 of us was a good amount, and only because we're constantly shifting too. We're constantly replacing each other. So if we were doing like a weekend cruise where we were anchoring every night, that would be way too many people. I'd be like, get away from me, because it's just too many people in the boat at once. But because we're hot bunking and you're just constantly shifting, we only overlapped during some meal times, which was really fun. But yeah, eight was a good amount of crew. Yeah.
So how did this boat perform compared to other boats you've sailed in blue water situations? What do you like?
Yeah, the Beneteau was a great boat to sail. It felt very sturdy, but it was very comfortable. So it has a lot of creature comforts, um, just little stuff like the types of hooks that they've put into the boat and stuff make it a really nice cruising boat. But the way that the rigging is all organized and all of your halyards and everything like that also make it really good for racing. So everything is easily accessible. And also Travis made a few changes here and there based on what he liked with the boat. But yeah, I definitely found that it was a well-built, sturdy boat. When we were in Hawaii and we got on the boat the first time, I was like, wow, this boat's huge. And then when you're in the middle of the ocean, you feel super tiny. So I was glad to be on such a big boat. And yeah, it felt really sturdy. It was a good boat. Yeah.
So this isn't really related to your sail in this situation, but like us, and maybe more severely than our situation, you sail on a lake that is in a mountainous region.
Mm-hmm.
How's that? And it's fairly 2 miles across, 4 miles across, compared to the length. That's somewhat tight. So how is the wind up there and sailing? Does it get a little exciting at times?
Yeah, it can get pretty sporty for sure. Yeah, because we also, on either side of the lake, it's mountains going straight up. So we get a lot of inflow and outflow winds just kind of streaming right through the mountains. So it can pick up quite a bit. And out on the main lake, you can get quite a bit of wave action because there is 100 kilometers for it to pick up, and you start getting those larger waves and stuff. So and actually Nelson is quite hot, like it gets to 40 degrees in the summer, and so but the mountains are cool, so we do get a lot of squalls that come through the area as well. That's really common for our area. So one of the things when I moved here, some of the sailors were like, well, Kootenay Lake makes really good sailors because you have to think on your feet, you have to be quick. You don't have that horizon line to watch the weather coming towards you. There's a big mountain, and all of a sudden these clouds start coming down the mountain, and you're realizing, uh-oh, and it's time to reef, or it's time to change my sail. So and it's been really fun but challenging for teaching as well, because I get brand new people who have never sailed before. We go through the points of sail, and we go through the sailing circle, and we get out on the water, and I say, okay, look at that house and point at that house, that's close hauled. And then all of a sudden the wind does a 180 on me, and next thing I'm saying, okay, well, now we're on a broad reach, and they're like, we didn't move. What do you mean we're on a broad reach? I don't understand. So from a teaching perspective, that's been a bit challenging to try and help people feel the wind and understand how it works with the boat and not just get out there and say, okay, the wind's coming from that way, and that's a constant, because it's, you know, as you know, it's never constant. So it does make for really good sailors. It's challenging.
Yeah, I think we can relate to you a little bit on that, and
yeah,
I agree. It's in a way it's a little challenging, but I think the reward is you become much more in tune with what's going around,
yeah,
and how to adjust the boat for that.
yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah.
So I didn't hear, how did Travis do on the way over? Did the boat place well?
Yeah, actually, they did really well. They crossed the line first, but because of their rating, they ended up at third in their um, in their league, or their whatever it's called. I can't think of the word right now. But yeah, they did really well. And it was interesting because the boat that ended up winning based on their perf rating took a slightly different route, like a less common route, went kind of north of the area that most of the boats went. And in the end, he ended up winning by going that route. So it was interesting to watch, because I don't know if you guys have ever watched the little trackers for the different races, and you see all these little boats just kind of moving centimeter by centimeter across the screen. But the boat that won kind of went way up and over, and everybody was like, ooh, that's tricky, because you could end up, he was following the weather and he could have ended up in the dead zone, but he actually caught the wind and managed to come right around. So but no, yeah, Travis did really well. They crossed the line first. So they had line honors, but they ended up coming third in their fleet. That's the word. Yeah.
How far apart were the boats then as they came in?
Yeah, you know what? It was pretty incredible. I'd have to double check the times, but it was less than an hour in the top 3 boats. And considering that they crossed 2,300 nautical miles, that's a tight race for that many boats to cross that close. Yeah, it was a pretty cool finish. We were all kind of watching on screen, and I kept texting him on Messenger and stuff. Hey, you're almost there. So yeah, it was pretty exciting.
So to a student of your class, I mean, your school, sailing school,
yeah,
that had never gone sailing in the ocean for the first time, what advice would you give him or her?
Yeah, good questions. I would say definitely, like I mentioned at the beginning, research your skipper or whoever you are going to be going with. You know, there's a lot of people who have experience sailing, but maybe not necessarily the right type of experience to handle being out in the open water. It is a different ball game. And a lot of times you could even just, you know, meet them for coffee, or you know, have a Zoom chat, I guess these days, with them, and you'll kind of get a sense for the personality. And that's one of the questions I get asked a lot is, you know, how do you pick a crew to go out on a trip like this? And for me, it's not really about the sailing, because I can teach you how to sail and I can teach you how to use the rigging on that boat and fix the sails. It's whether or not your personality fits the bill. So a lot of times it's looking at the various personalities and how they're coming together on the boat, and just kind of making sure that you have the right mix of personalities, because you will have people being pushed to their personal limit, and that's when things can go wrong. So we were really lucky that, you know, Jeff, Ren, Joe, and I are super laid back. We didn't have any personality issues on our side of the boat. There were a couple little things on the other side of the boat, but again, nothing major. But yeah, I kind of tell people I can teach you how to be a good sailor. I can't teach you how to not be an asshole. So.
Hey, thank you.
Well, okay. I think we had some excellent questions, excellent answers, and this has been an hour really well spent, Penny.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been really fun. It's
Yeah.
nice to meet new sailors. Yay.
Nice to
Or
meet
more
you.
sailors.
And
Yeah.
I'd like to point everyone, once this COVID business is done, we can vouch for the beauty up in Nelson, and the water is a fascinating place. And now that they've got a wonderful sailing school up there, we'd like to invite and encourage people to go up there for a vacation or a sailing vacation to visit Penny up at Sail Nelson. And,
yeah, I'll take you out sailing.
yeah. So we hope for better things in the future. I hope we can cross the border and come up and say hi, and vice versa, come on down. But good luck in all your sailing endeavors, Penny. And thank you so much for teaching us, entertaining us for this hour. And we hope we can meet again, as Roy Rogers, I think, would say. So without further ado, we'll let you get back to your busyness, and hope to see the rest of you folks out on the water on Utah Lake here. So
thanks, Penny.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. That was really fun.
Okay,
Thank you.
take care, Penny.